Hello and welcome to the show. Today we're tackling two deeply entwined topics, the idea of having it all and the pervasive experience of imposter syndrome. My guest is author of Be the First, lawyer, coach and speaker Caroline Flanagan, who shares her perspective on both. We'll explore what having it all truly means and how we can navigate the challenges of imposter syndrome along the way. Let's get going. Hello, Caroline.
Hi, Danusia.
I want to know, where do you stand on the have it all debate? So I often wonder whether having it all has become doing it all that actually is really about being it all.
I absolutely embrace this idea of having it all. And I think the conversation is wasted when it's about whether women can or can't have it all. And it should really, our energy should be much more focused on, well, what would your all look like? And what would it take for you to have your all, instead of this blanket idea that it's either possible or impossible, to actually engage on a much more personal and individual level with what it is. Yeah, all it is really talking about what our dreams and aspirations are and whether that is possible for us to achieve.
Yeah, it's a really funny old debate, isn't it? We are consistently, as women, questioned as to whether we can have it all, and men aren't. It's not framed in this same way. And so you're pointing us to the all. Can you have it all? What's the all? And I'm wondering, what is the having piece?
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because so often, even the expression having it all is interpreted as doing it all. So that's the first thing. Honestly, where you find, if I'm working with an overwhelmed mother or parent who feel they can't cope, there's too much is being expected of them from work and at home, and they're getting lost in that battle, then the comment or the conclusion that leads to is that women can't have it all, you just can't do both. And that is people talking about doing it all, trying to do everything. And if you dig a little bit deeper beneath the surface of a hardworking woman who's stressed and feeling that it's not possible, what you'll find is her trying to do everything, or you'll find her trying to do everything to an impossible, perfect standard. And that's what she's failing at. She's not failing at the having bit. So that's the first thing I'd like to say about that particular verb. Is to distinguish it from the doing, which is very, very different. And I would not advise anybody to do it all. That is definitely a
Killer, isn't it? It's an absolute killer.
It's an absolute killer. And nobody wins, actually, because there are more things to do than there is time available. On the other side, about having, what I like about that particular word is it talks about it as if it sets it up as something that's continuous, that's ongoing. And I think it's the same with having it all. You don't sit down and in one particular moment saying, oh, I have it all. I have everything. My life is perfect. The having is that idea that it's an ongoing thing. I'm in the process of. I am in the act of working and raising my family, and I'm making adjustments between the two so that I'm allowing those two to exist, allowing myself to have both those things, but that it's an ongoing process. It's something that requires work, it requires adjustment, it requires a sense of humor. There are lots of things that are required, but if you're prepared to bring those things to the table, then that's, that for me is what it means to be able to have it all.
How do you have it all? What does having it all look like for you?
So the way I define it for myself is this idea that I believe I have all I need in order to be happy, right? So I've got what it takes in order to make myself happy. And that sort of feeds into the having it all, because it's the reason why I feel I can have it. So say that whatever situation I'm finding myself in, whatever challenge I face, or however difficult the day is looking like, somewhere inside of me, I can find a way to work it out. The starting point, the source is always what's going on inside me. It's always how I'm thinking about it. It's always my approach. And I believe in my capacity as a human being. I think it's capacity we all have, which is to find the solutions for ourselves. So to challenge the way we're thinking. We have an ability to challenge or change the way we're approaching that problem or thinking about that problem. And that can create a breakthrough. That can lead us to a solution. And what's important about that is it's putting the power back in my hands effectively. It's not a blanket, oh, it's possible or it's not possible. I don't operate in that space of whether things can or can't be done objectively. Well, if I haven't figured it out this way, how else can I figure it out? That's, for me, what really having it all is recognizing that you have the capacity to solve any problem.
And I'm smiling from ear to ear because what you just described is actually what I meant by being it all. Each of us has that capacity to be the solution to whatever comes our way, and therefore the all is sorted because we have that within us. As I talked with Caroline, I wanted to add in imposter syndrome to our have it all focus. Here's what I asked next. So, how does that interplay with feeling like an imposter? Because there's the seeds of it here, isn't there?
The thing I always say is, my imposter syndrome is real because I was an imposter. I was an imposter at home. I did not belong at home. It wasn't my natural environment. I was an imposter at school. It wasn't my natural environment. So it very much was born of, like, how did you get here? You don't fit. You're not doing what the rest of us are doing. How did you get here? And I feel like a fraud. I don't deserve my success or to be where I am. And any minute now, someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and expose me as a fraud, as someone who shouldn't be here, and, expose me and extract me and put me back where I should be, where I truly belong, wherever that is. And you can imagine, as from the age of 6, this shy Black girl in a school full of white people, where even the way they talked about their family and their understanding of how the world worked was different. There were these constant reminders that I didn't belong or wasn't like everybody else. And then be really scared about the next thing I said in case that would expose me. And that would be more proof that I didn't belong. And that's exactly what the whole imposter syndrome that we might experience in our work or in an organization or wherever it is, where people feel they're in a place or they're at a level, they haven't caught up with themselves in terms of where they see themselves. They still see themselves as not achieving, as someone who's nervous, who's someone who doesn't have the right skills, but they're actually in a place where they've been recognized as having those skills or recognized as being valuable. So that's exactly what my childhood was. It's not a metaphor for me, it was the reality.
I hear it. Absolutely. But it also sounds like you spent your life proving yourself.
Oh, for sure. I think it's about trying to avoid being exposed, because that's the most painful thing. Avoid somebody saying, you shouldn't be here at all. And that the idea of someone saying that and taking you away from that environment is the most painful thing. That I wasn't who they thought I was. The girl or the teenager or the woman who was not bright enough, who just managed to somehow hoodwink everybody along the way, who didn't know the right way to do things, whatever that meant. I have a whole catalogue of these so-called achievements, whether it's my A-level grades, going to Cambridge University, getting like a job offer at every job I went for, that I could have hooked my confidence, a sense of self and a sense of belonging to. I didn't see really much of a connection between me, myself, and my self-worth and the achievements that I made. So my self-worth, say, was at a level 2. My achievements were, say, at a level 10. And I was constantly afraid that they would realize that I wasn't a level 10, I was actually a level 2.
Yeah, that's a big strain, isn't it?
It's exhausting. And that is what people who suffer from imposter syndrome suffer. It is emotionally very exhausting. It drives you to a level of perfection because you don't want anyone to see any cracks. You don't want to give any clues away that you may not be what people think you are. It is emotionally and physically exhausting.
None of us are that curated, fabulous, front of house self. We're all fragile humans with wounds, with sadnesses, with things that have gone wrong that we're trying to make good of.
Our own story of our own places where we don't fit. And it's not about painting such an awful picture and saying, oh, this is what I'm like and I'm not perfect. It's the way we see ourselves can be so different to how we think we see other people. So it's with imposter syndrome it's comparing your inside with other people's outside. People might compare themselves to Instagram feeds or whatever, someone who looks perfect. They take that as the reality for the other person. But when they're looking at themselves, they look at their wounds, they look at their weaknesses, they look at their irregularities, they look at their failures. So you're not comparing like we all are these imperfect, beautiful human beings that have things to celebrate and things to reflect on and learn from. And the important thing is to recognize that those thoughts you have about yourselves, they're just thoughts. They're there for a reason, but it's still just a thought. And I can choose what to make that mean. So I can choose to make that mean that I'm less of a person, or I can choose to simply make it mean that I had quite an interesting journey to this point. I still suffer from imposter syndrome when I'm trying to achieve an ambitious goal. I'm doing something new. I can remind myself that it's just a thought and a feeling that I have because of my journey. That doesn't have to mean that I can't succeed. Doesn't have to mean that I shouldn't take the next step. In fact, it's the opposite. It actually means that I'm on the right path. And I always use my imposter syndrome now as a sign that it's something I need to do, not a sign that I should hide away and not do it.
As you're talking about the fact that these are merely thoughts, they do not make you who you are. They're a process for you. I've been recently reading Professor Steve Peters' great book for children called My Hidden Chimp, and I really recommend it. He talks about that we have the two parts of our brain, and one is the chimp. And so it's when the chimp takes over. And what we're really talking about with the imposter syndrome piece is the actual part of the brain that is the chimp brain. And unless we actually, learn about the various pieces of the brain and how they work, then we are overrun by that chimp.
So I've just read a book called Your Brain at Work. And it may not be the same author, but it's exactly that. It's all about the workings of the brain and why we react in certain ways, why we do certain things, and how to then use that information to make better decisions, to recognize that the thoughts we have aren't necessarily the reality and shouldn't necessarily drive our actions. And I agree. I think it is fascinating and almost like compulsory, as you say, that we get to understand our brains better.
Yeah.
So the idea that part of your brain is going to be saying things to you. It's not always on your side. It's not always doing the best for you in that moment. And it's not always right. So that sounds like very similar. That's exactly where it comes from. So I'm really excited to read that book, especially if it's about how we can help our children.
It's fantastic. It's wonderful. And it really puts things in perspective that we're not those thoughts. We have there's two of us in our brain. And it's, if we allow the chimp, it will take over. It will take over. Well, thank you so, so much for this conversation, Caroline.
Oh, thank you so much, Danusia. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I hope this conversation has been helpful for you. Remember, you're not alone, and you have the power to overcome feelings of self-doubt. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and family. Until next time, keep thinking and loving. Take care, everyone.